Hello, my name is Kate Wexell and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So about 2 to 3 videos ago, I said that I was going to create a video talking about why I was rejected to some of the top schools in the country and why I was instead accepted to some about 30% acceptance rate schools. So I will be going over a few of my stats. However, I already created a stats video and you can watch it up above. Anyway, if you haven't subscribed, please do so now and hit that like button for more content. So just to go over the schools that I was accepted, waitlisted, and rejected to, here are some of them. So I was accepted to Kenyon College, Fordham University, Emerson College, Mizzou, which is the University of Missouri, where I'm attending now, the University of Iowa, and then Seton University, which that one was more just because they sent me a fee waiver and I was like, well, what the hell? Anyway, at all of those schools except for the University of Iowa, I was offered significant merit scholarship awards. However, I was then waitlisted at Colby College, Grinnell College, and the University of Chicago, and then I was rejected from Northwestern, Yale, WashU, Stanford, Wellesley, and Bowdoin. If you want to skip to some of the sections talking about specific reasons why I think that I was rejected or waitlisted at some of these schools, you can do so, and the timestamps are in the description below. However, I'm going to get started with talking about first the circumstances and why I applied to some of these schools, because I think that that played almost the biggest factor in my rejection to some of these schools. So basically, I come from a suburban area near the St. Louis metro. And so whenever I was born, my town was actually still considered rural. I did go to a public school my entire life, and my parents did both graduate from college. However, they were first-generation college students, and they both came from poverty. So while they were very, very fortunate to encourage me to get an education, they didn't actually know anything about the college process because they both went to regional state schools and were really just looking for what was going to be affordable for them so that they could be the first people in their families to get that education. Needless to say, I was pushed by my parents with always this desire to go to college. However, I never knew sort of the tips and tricks of how to get into some of those top schools. My family knew, starting from when I was small up through middle school, high school, that I was that straight-A student and I was always trying to be involved in a lot of things. So they thought that I might stand a good chance, but really, we knew nothing. I went through no test prep, and my school didn't really offer a whole lot of resources. They went through one session with the student body about how to sign up for the Common App, but even students in the top 10 of my class didn't even know the deadlines for when to apply to college. So there wasn't too much assistance. Anyway, I was also in a very toxic relationship during my sophomore and junior year, and that person was a year older than me, and so they had been shoving this idea of going to the same school together down my throat, so I never really had the opportunity to explore schools, so I didn't actually know about a lot of the schools that I ended up applying to until my senior year during that first semester when you're applying to college. So with that being said, the way that I applied to schools was not great. Basically, I knew from the beginning that I was going to apply to the University of Missouri and the University of Iowa as my safety schools for journalism and creative writing, respectively. And then all the other schools that I applied to, I either applied as a journalism, creative writing, or English major. So I didn't know how early action or early decision worked. And so I used my early action on Stanford's restrictive early action. I had actually never even known what Stanford was before that year. However, there was a social situation going on, and that's really the only reason that I applied to Stanford. So I ended up wasting my early action on that, despite it being the most selective institution in the nation. I know it's kind of hard to believe that somebody didn't know what Stanford was, but I was really just looking for what school is in that region of California, and it was a very stupid reason, and I definitely did not deserve to get in, which is why I was promptly rejected. However, that also decreased my chances of getting into other schools, since a lot of schools don't have restrictive early action and just have regular early action, meaning that you can improve your chances by applying to multiple schools early action. For regular decision though, I knew that I was going to apply to Northwestern. I kind of decided towards the end that I was going to apply to Yale, and then I knew I was going to apply to the University of Chicago as sort of reach schools. However, I really knew nothing about the selectivity of them. I did love the location though of the University of Chicago and Northwestern, and I sort of fell in love with Chicago. Being from Illinois myself, I applied to WashU because it's right near my house. It's about 25 minutes away. And then some of the other schools that I applied to, it was mostly just because they were free to apply to. So I had sort of had a thing for Bowdoin after watching a show that mentioned it. And then I applied to Grinnell because my boyfriend at the time had just gotten accepted early decision. I was like, well, if we're still together in August of next year, I guess April, whenever we would be making decisions, then I at least wanted to keep my options open. It was also free to apply to that. But then I applied to Colby College, Wellesley, Seton Hall, Emerson, Fordham, and all of those schools, literally just because they were free. I filled out all of those applications in sort of that week before the applications were due. So needless to say, some of the schools like Wellesley, Colby College, Grinnell, those schools, they do track demonstrated interest, I'm pretty sure. And so a lot of them will either waitlist you or reject you just because they have so many students who are top tier who apply to them, and then they end up going to Ivy League schools instead. And so they try to accept people who they feel like are pretty likely to end up going to their institution. So with the waitlist, I think that that's sort of why I was waitlisted at Colby College. They're known to do that. And then at Grinnell, I literally did not fill out their Why Grinnell essay, because you submit your application, and then about a month later, they ask you to fill out the Why Grinnell essay. And by that point, my boyfriend and I had broken up, so I didn't fill it out. But I was still waitlisted. And then the University of Chicago, I showed like a very strong interest in going there, and I think that it was a good sign that I was at least waitlisted there. However, I was rejected at the others. And so basically, I'm going to go through a few categories now of different parts of my application, looking back on it now over a year later, of why I think I got rejected. So the first thing that I'm going to go through is test scores. So most of those REACH schools use a very similar ranking system as Harvard, and so all of the Harvard metrics for admissions are actually available now due to the lawsuits going on. And so the very first thing that they're going to look at are your academics and your test scores, and I think that that is definitely where I faltered. So basically, all of those schools, it's not even necessarily like, did you have in the 50th percentile at least of admitted students? It is literally just, did you have a 33 ACT or the SAT equivalent, which I believe is like a 1470, 1480, maybe 1490, I'm not sure, as the minimum, and then after that, they grade a 33 the same as a 36. I did not know this. I did get a 33 on the ACT, so I was good in that regard, and I thought that my 1450 on my SAT was the same as a 33, so I submitted that as well. Little did I know that that was actually equivalent to a 32. So therefore, I probably already didn't make the academic rankings. And then additionally, at my school, we offered 15 AP classes, but the way that our schedules were set up, it was virtually impossible to complete any significant number of AP classes due to all of the prerequisites. So for example, the only AP class that you could take sophomore year was AP Music Theory. You were not allowed to take any APs as a freshman. And then there were some classes like AP Language and Composition that you could only take as a senior if you had already taken AP Literature and Composition, and just other things like that, or there would be like one section of AP Psychology, which is why I wasn't able to take that. And so I ended up only taking 6 AP classes, and due to COVID, I only took 3 of the AP exams, and none of them were available by the time that I submitted my application. Also, at my school, our GPA system was weighted out of 4.33, and we did have rankings, which after reviewing all sorts of other videos, a lot of schools that are really good at feeding students into these top schools, they don't have rankings, specifically so that the schools judge a student based off of their class rigor, their overall GPA, and then their extracurriculars, rather than competing against their classmates who might be equally as qualified. So I was actually in the top 6% of my class, but I was ranked like 40 or something at the time of applying, which I did go up. but that was out of about 630, and then that number actually ended up decreasing because people dropped out or graduated early. So my rank was not sort of in that range that they wanted. I was not valedictorian, I was not top 10. I did still graduate summa cum laude, so I was at the top of my class. However, the percentages were not adding up, and that is a significant factor. And then also the reason for that was I did get 2 B pluses and a B, but then I was so involved in the music program that all of those unweighted courses end up counting against you. Which I personally think that that's a flaw in the education system, that being involved in the arts and wanting to enrich yourself in that way counts against you when it comes time to applying for college. But that's a story for a different day. And then the last thing is my extracurriculars. So as I said, I didn't really have any training about how to go through the college application process. So everything that I did in high school and everything that I did in middle school had all just been things that I was genuinely interested in. And as somebody who's really invested in community service, I sort of view my role as just trying to fill the role of whatever is needed. So I did not know that you were supposed to get involved in more of like state level or national level things, and I actually turned down several opportunities that I'd had to get involved in those things because I wanted to better devote my time to some of the things I was already working on. I also realized after submitting my application that, for example, for Model UN, which I did for all 4 years of high school, and I was in leadership for 3 of those years, I had listed myself as lead delegate because that's what we called the people in charge at my school. And I did not list myself as being club president, which is what I technically was. So I sort of ended up accidentally downplaying myself in that regards. Also, a big thing is that you should have some sort of passion project, and my passion project I didn't start actually until my senior year of high school, so I didn't have a solid backing for that, and instead what I had was involvement in scouting, Model UN, which I didn't list as president, president of philosophy club, band, which it was hard to be in leadership for that just because of the way that my school's program is set up with being 25th in the nation for marching bands. Our concert band was not stressed as heavily at that time, so since I didn't have leadership in the marching band specifically, it made it really hard for that to be significant. And then I forget what else was on my application. You can once again watch my video about all of that where I read directly from ComNap, but then at the time I didn't have any significant national achievements. And so I think that all of that together showed that I did try to be very, very involved in my community. However, the big things that I have gotten now were not present at the time of my application, and then also it didn't really tell a cohesive story. I was applying as a creative writing major to top schools or an English major, and those are very, very popular majors, and honestly not majors that you can make a whole lot of money off of. And so when they're looking at people entering for those specific majors, they're looking at people who have already been published in a ton of different locations. They're looking for people who have won national contests, and I didn't even know what Young Arts or the Scholastic Art and Writing competition were until my senior year. So I was sort of at a disadvantage for all of those things, and altogether it showed that I was capable of attending 30% acceptance schools because I did try hard and I did have good grades overall, and I did try to be very involved. However, it was not at that caliber that top schools are looking for, where they're trying to look for global change makers. So if I were to give advice to myself at the beginning of high school and to all of you on YouTube, it would be to, first of all, plan at the beginning of high school the classes that you're going to take, and try to just take the most selective classes. Try to take at least 50% of the AP classes that your school offers, and of course if your school doesn't offer AP classes, then that's completely fine and you're probably better off that way. And then try to do what I did, where if there was a class that you were interested in taking that your school didn't offer, find certificate classes online to show that you still have like a strong interest in that and that you're really motivated to learn. Or take like an online summer school course, because I did that for creative writing and I honestly had a lot of fun. Second of all, make sure that you actually do keep straight A's. It probably doesn't matter as much if it's an A- or an A, but definitely try to not get any more than about like 1 B+. I have heard of people getting into Harvard with 2 B+, but My 2 B pluses and a B were not great for me. But your classes and your GPA are probably the most important part of your application, just because that means that you're qualified. Then be very careful about your test scores. My 33 on the ACT was fine. However, make sure that you either only submit the scores that are good enough to fit that threshold, or if you are not able to achieve those scores, then you can definitely go test optional, but be very careful about that. And then with extracurriculars, try to not necessarily put yourself into a box and tell yourself that you can't explore anything outside of what your specific interest is. However, with whatever the top 3 or 4 hobbies of yours are, try to maximize those. And you don't even necessarily have to start like a nonprofit or do tons and tons of charity work or things like that, but if you try to maximize your top activities and have a super large outreach with them, and say that your passion is music, try to actually enter contests. I know I didn't get into piano contests until my senior year of high school, and by then it was sort of too late. But try to get involved in different organizations that are bigger than just your school and just your community. Or if it is just within your community, figure out how can you maximize that? How can you reach more people in your community? How can you be that leader instead of just being a member? Anyway, I hope that was helpful. And in the future, I'll be making more videos sort of about my transfer process, because I'm currently trying to transfer from my state school that I'm currently attending to a slightly more selective school, mostly because I'm trying to switch majors. However, if I have some good updates on that, I will let you guys know. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and once again, remember to like this video and subscribe.